Hello, this talk is on Iran. Is it a paper tiger or is it a superpower? Well, Central Asia's longest longest standing civilization is Iran, and Iran's always seen the Middle East as and Central Asia, Afghanistan particularly, as its um, territory, its empire. As you remember, back all the way back to the Spartans, all of that area was seen as the Persians' empire, and the Persians see themselves as quite distinct from the Arabs. They're an Indo-European people, and they see the Arabs as inferior. Well, both Semitic peoples, Jews and Arabs, as inferior. Um, is it today a a major power? Well, or is it a paper tiger? Well, it can't refine its own oil. It has inferior and outdated military equipment for the heavy stuff. So therefore, it's very far behind in the science of war. But it has some crucial strengths, which make it, in my view, a Central Asian superpower. First, it has territorial control over energy. The only other country with as much control over energy uh, transportation is Russia, and Russia is an ally of Iran. It might not be overt, they might not be going and holding big summits that the world sees, but Russia and maybe even China is transporting weapons to Iran. Iran has massive proxy forces in the Gulf, namely Hezbollah. As Robert Bayer said, the Israelis were stopped in 2006. They lost the war in Lebanon. For the first time ever, an Israeli armoured column was stopped. This is like the Russians winning at Stalingrad. This is like Napoleon being stopped at Waterloo. It is something that is a major turning point. Hezbollah will be able to rain rockets down on Israel and cover it. As I looked through YouTube to try out some Hebrew lessons, an Israeli made a comment, a humorous comment. I think it was intended to be that he has rockets in his garden. This is what the Israelis have consigned themselves to because of the threat from the Palestinians. They're used to people blowing themselves up on buses. This is how they have to live because of this threat from Iran and other Arab countries and Al-Qaeda. However, that will be nothing compared to a fully unleashed Iran, because Iran can put 1 million men in uniform, as Robert Bayer said. But what Robert Bayer didn't say was that these million men could be used as insurgents. Therefore, they're more dangerous out of uniform than in uniform. They would be able to flood Iraq with Iranian irregular forces and Arab forces. They would be able to set the Gulf oil on fire. Now, all this goes back to when in the 1950s, when the British oil establishment was entrenched in Iran, and Mosadque nationalised it. This didn't appeal to Eisenhower. Remember Eisenhower, the one who warned against the industrial military complex? Well, he's the one who got rid of Mosadque, a democratically elected leader. Although Mosadque was an anti-communist and kicked the communists out of Iran, because you have to remember that Britain and the Soviet Union led a joint influence over Iran that made Iran basically a colony of Britain and of the Soviet Union all throughout the war. Why do you think they held the Allied conferences in Iran? Iran wasn't neutral. Iran was subjugated to the British Empire, as was all of the Middle East. And the anger from this is called blowback. But then again, how irrational was Iran after the revolution which toppled the Shah? The Shah whose Shah's family was put in by the CIA. Iran was a completely irrational actor. It blew up Khobar barracks. Not to mention the fact that Israel strafed and bombed the USS Liberty. Another irrational actor. But we're allies with Israel. And we allow Israel to have nuclear weapons. Or rather, do we allow them, or if they just stated the fact that we can't do anything about them having nuclear weapons. Yet, for Iran to have a nuclear program is completely unacceptable to Israel. It's an existential threat. Michael Shearer said that they could knock hell out of Iran. And this was not what he was advocating, because he was advocating a non-interventionist foreign policy. So between Bayer and Shearer, there is a big disagreement. Bayer believes that Al-Qaeda is dissipating, whereas Shearer believes that Al-Qaeda is a very, very powerful force, and I would agree with him. How could we use Iran as a solution to Al-Qaeda? Because they hate the Taliban and they hate the Sunnis, Sunni Wahhabis that Al-Qaeda represents, and who the Saudi royal family and Saudi lobby represents. What Iraq was a meeting of minds between the Saudi lobby and the Israeli lobby in America, and that is what really sparked it. Those two things coming together allowed the whirlwind forces to open up against Saddam. Now, of course, the Israelis and Saudis don't like one another, but the Iranians hate the Saudis much more than they hate the Israelis, because the Saudis are completely irrational. Iran and the UK and Israel and US and the EU, together with Russia, could recognise Iran as a major superpower in that area, and they could sit down and have a rational discussion with them. You might even get them to stop backing Hezbollah. That's unlikely. We could use the Iranians' help in Afghanistan, because that's their traditional area of sphere of influence, and they're the only power that's been there a considerable length of time from ancient times. Also, if Pakistan doesn't want to live in the dark, they're going to have to deal with Iran. Pakistan is Sunni and has a major problem with Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda could possibly take over Pakistan, and they would gain control of Pakistan's nuclear program. Iran could be our proxy there to help us. So I think we have to take Iran seriously. I think Robert Baer may be overstating it, that it's a superpower. We saw how Iraq was said was an Arab superpower, and we completely trounced them in 2 wars, one within 100 hours and the other within 4 weeks. But fighting Iran would not be like fighting Iraq. It will be asymmetric warfare against millions and millions of fanatical fighters. It would take 30 years, and we just don't have the money to do it. So therefore I agree with Robert Bayer's overall analysis. You can check out more about Robert Bayer and Michael Shearer and their books on some other talks. Thank you for listening, YouTube.